Greetings, anatomy fans. I am Lissa Mahalik. This is my lovely assistant, Napoleon, Bony Parts. And today we are going to look at the rotator cuff. We're going to look at the anatomical reasons that it gets injured. We're going to look at who gets it injured, and we're going to look at why the damn thing gets injured, because it happens all the effing time. I know I personally have subluxated my shoulder. I have got rotator cuff tendonitis. Don't have a tear yet, and I'm hoping to keep it that way. Here's how I do it. So let us move on. Now, when you have a rotator cuff tear, this took me a while to figure out because I always had this image of like some sort of like round cuff of muscles going around the shoulder. But in fact, Bonnie is going to demonstrate for us. The rotator cuff is in fact this kind of fan of muscles, more a fan than an actual cuff. Excuse me while I take off the deltoid. If you remove the deltoid muscle, you can see how the rotator cuff comes down from the head of the humerus and controls it. In fact, let's zoom in. Well, let's change the camera angle a little bit. I'm very technical with my computer camera work, just so you know. You can see up here at the top, this little pink muscle. There we go. It's a little hard to see because 3 dimensions, but it comes out onto the top of the humerus. So that's a little closer to where it goes right here. Yep. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle right there. So you can see that this muscle, the supraspinatus, supra being superior as in above, not superior as in better than. There's no value judgment here. But above this bone here, which is the spine of the scapula. So supraspinatus is the muscle that is above the spine of the scapula. And that little bugger comes down here, goes underneath this bit, which is called your acromion process, and onto the head of your humerus. Let's go over that again on your anatomy books. You are, at this very moment, carrying around an extremely accurate, completely functioning anatomy book. It's called your body. This is not cheating. Took me a while to figure this out too. See, I'm trying to get you this information a lot faster than I got this information. So here's hoping that you're earlier in your career than me and you're like, thank God somebody's teaching me this stuff, because I really wish I had somebody to do this earlier in my career. So here you are. This is your anatomy book, and we are going to follow along in your anatomy book as we look at the parts of the rotator cuff. So up here you can feel this flat space here, this flat ledge. This is what it looks like naked. This is called your acromion process. That's acro as in acrobat or acropolis, and acromion, as, I don't know, because it's Greek. But the acro means high, as in, you know, the acrobat, like aerial acrobatics, or the acropolis, it's on the high point. So this is the high point of your shoulder, the acromion process. Down here, if you feel back, it feels like a second collarbone in back. And that is the spine of your scapula. Just like your spine goes right down the middle of your body, has this nice ridge down it, then you have this nice ridge, the spine, right along the back of, or right along the top of your shoulder blade. Now again, the supraspinatus is the muscle that is above the spine of the scapula. There's the infraspinatus down here that's like infrared is below red on the spectrum. It's infraspinatus is below the spine of the scapula. This is the teres minor, and underneath here, not the blue one. Let me take off the pec major here. Ooh, that's a kind of a mess. Trust me when I say that underneath the scapula is this green muscle that we call the subscapularis. There it is, and it comes right up here onto the head of your humerus. You can see these guys just hang around the head of the humerus right here, and that's why it's called the rotator cuff, not that it does any sort of rotating. When you let your arm drop, you can feel your acromion process right below. You can feel the head of your humerus, not as far down as Boney's, I hope. And if you rotate your arm, you will feel, 1, you'll feel the head of your humerus rotating. 2, that is your rotator cuff doing that action. That's why it's called the rotator cuff. So the supraspinatus is the one that gets injured the most often, and here's why. Because you can see it runs right under your acromion process. Now, I'm going to do this on the other side since this arm of Boney's is all taped up. So excuse me, hon. If I have a muscle coming under here, in my, above the spine of the scapula, in the supraspinous fossa, fossa being Latin for hole. You guys don't have to remember the names for this. Oh gosh, my finger's stuck. You don't have to remember the names for this, but what you do have to remember is the mechanics. So here we have this supraspinatus, with my finger getting totally stuck in the supraspinous fossa. Here we go. Supraspinatus is right here. If I'm just moving my arm down here, it's fine. If I'm moving my arm forward, it's actually in pretty good shape. If I'm moving my arm out to the side, I'm going to start pinching my finger really fast unless this acromion process gets out of the way. Now, if you have a client or if your own shoulders are like Boney's, I'm really sorry because his shoulder blades are literally screwed to his rib cage, which means that shoulder blade isn't going anywhere. On an actual human being, or hopefully on you, and if not on your clients now, on your clients very soon, what's going to happen if you put your hand on your acromion process, let your arm raise up, you can feel how the acromion process will actually rotate up and out of the way. Put your fingers back on the spine of the scapula, that kind of backwards collarbone. You can feel how the spine of the scapula spins so that the acromion process spins up and out of the way. This is key to good shoulder mechanics. If your shoulder blades can spin properly, if the scapula, the shoulder blade can spin, it will get the acromion process out of the way of the humerus and it will no longer destroy your supraspinatus. If that's not the case, and there are many ways, there are many things that get stuck, then the acromion process doesn't move. When the humerus comes up, it goes bonk into the acromion process and you tear your supraspinatus and you officially have a rotator cuff tear. Congratulations and many condolences. Yeah. So one more thing on the shoulder complex is that people often think like, oh, this is the shoulder joint. Well, actually, this is only one part of the shoulder girdle. And the reason I'm going to show you this is because restrictions can happen all the way around. So here is your shoulder blade. And if it's not rotating, it could be because of back muscles. And it could be because of the neck muscles coming down and attaching to it. It could also be because of what's going on with your collarbone. Why is that, you may ask? Well, I'm so glad you did ask. Because you see, right here is your acromion process. This is still part of your scapula, actually. And this thing attaches right here to your collarbone. This is your acromioclavicular joint. So collarbone, clavicle, acromion process. So acromioclavicular joint right here. If you've ever heard of separated shoulder, this is the joint that gets damaged in separated shoulder. So, if you feel your acromion process and you put a finger on your clavicle and you move your arm, you can feel how your acromion process moves more than your clavicle does. You can even find the exact joint by bringing your fingers together and finding the point at which the motion changes, which is really fun. At least I think it's really fun. And I hope you do too. So if you follow that joint along, follow your joint. If you follow that bone along, you'll eventually come to your sternum. So this is where your collarbone meets your sternum. And this is your sternoclavicular joint. Put one finger on your sternum, one finger on your collarbone, move your arm. Stuff moves. So if you have tight shoulders, forward shoulders, tight pecs, this purple thing, this is the pec major. You know that big, oh, I'm gonna work my chest. Look like Vin Diesel, yeah. Yeah, I'm never gonna look like Vin Diesel. If your pecs are really tight and pulling you forward, that's going to affect the ability of your shoulder blade to move because your shoulder blade is attached to your collarbone, is attached to your pec major muscle. So everything's connected. So if you have an issue with rotator cuff tears, rotator cuff pain, first thing to do, check the shoulder blades, see if they're rotating properly. if you can, get them to rotate properly. If they're not going to rotate properly, come round front. See what you can do to release the pec muscles and see if that helps the collarbone to move so that the shoulder blade can move properly. Now, who are we talking about? Who gets these injuries? Lots of people get these injuries. Usually, honestly, just about anyone active can get these injuries. Anybody who has overhead exercises, tennis, golf, whitewater kayaking, I speak from experience. Anything where you have to reach overhead, any sort of sport, any sort of activity. So that kind of encompasses a lot of people. What's even more exciting is that once you get older, and older can be anything over 30, sorry, your body does change once you hit over 30. Doesn't mean you get less hot. It just means you have to take a little bit better care of your anatomy book. So you don't need to be active to tear your rotator cuff. And honestly, in my view, older is always going to be 20 years older than me, even though I still have to take care of my anatomy book. You don't have to be active to tear it. Just sometimes things get weak, things get loose, and especially if you are not active, honestly, particularly if you're not active, you can tear it with a fall, you can tear it with a sudden movement, because if the shoulder blade isn't rotating, bam, oops, and that sucks. So what do you do about it? If you have a client with rotator cuff issues, then the first thing you should do is find out if they're going to a physical therapist. And the second thing you should do is you should rip the physical therapist's exercises. Yes, you should. One, because you can learn a hell of a lot from what that physical therapist is prescribing for them. Two, because your client then gets extra quality time working on those exercises, because they don't do their homework. They don't. But when they work in your sessions, then not only are they doing their homework, they're doing their homework well, because you are watching their form and you are making sure they're doing it correctly, and they're doing it at all. So you totally want to be doing their physical therapy exercises with them. Maybe not, we'll do them together, as in you do yours and I'll do mine, but you want to be making sure that they are doing it correctly. Also, the extra bonus is that if you can talk to the physical therapist, or your client talks to the physical therapist, you might be able to find a relationship, especially if you end up liking the way the other works. So you can refer people back and forth, always good for the business. And finally, another great reason to do that is, that was all my reasons. I'm sorry. Keep your people informed, learn from the physical therapists, and hey, maybe you can make a great business relationship in the future. So in general, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to strengthen the rotator cuff muscles, either by external rotation, and my arm is not in the right position here. Let me back up so you can actually see this properly. Excuse me, Bonnie. So, my camera work again. External rotation, going from here, holding a band, or wrapping the band around something. Internal rotation, if Bonnie was holding the band, I would go internally rotating. Extension, abduction, especially abduction, and working in the transverse or horizontal plane. So these are all great motions. Again, you're really going to want to work specifically with whatever exercises your person is working with with their PT. And if they don't have a PT, frankly, get them to a PT, because no matter how much you're learning from this, it is not qualifying you to diagnose squat. Don't do it. You cannot diagnose unless you have some certification that says, I am not qualified to diagnose things. This ain't it. I wish it were, it ain't. So finally, the major things to do, be really picky about form, because you can absolutely support their recovery by checking their form and making sure they're doing the work. Things not to do, don't let them get enthusiastic about heavy weights. I have seen people using like 12-pound weights. Yeah, I'm going to use my rotator cuff. You're not using your rotator cuff. At that point, your biceps brachii, your biceps, yeah. This is a great muscle, but most of what it does is supinates and externally rotates your forearm. So if you're doing a whole bunch of external rotation, if the weight gets too big, your biceps is going to take over, which looks really good, but isn't accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. Make sure you want to accomplish, you're getting what you want accomplished. Let me start that sentence again. Be sure you're accomplishing what you want to get accomplished. Even if you have to stop and start all over again. Do what you set out to do. Keep your goals in mind and make sure that you get there. So that is actually it for our little mini video. I hope you've learned a ton. If you have questions, you can join us in Somatic Anatomy's experiential anatomy party. The anatomy party is a great place to be. Check us out on Facebook. You have the link in your email. And questions, comments, that's a great place to post them. It really is. Super fun stuff is coming up, as it always is. If you have enjoyed this, hang out, keep watching what's coming down the road, because great stuff is coming down the road. So I'm Lissa Mahalik. This is Napoleon, Bony Parts, and we are somaticanatomy.com. And we ask you, are you enjoying your anatomy? I certainly hope you are. Certainly hope you are enjoying it. More after this. Enjoy your anatomy and have a nice day.